Welcome to our winter symposium. I'm Heidi Hernandez. I am a learning consultant here with PuzzleHR, and I'm going to be your moderator today. This morning, I am joined by a stellar group of panelists who will be engaging with me to discuss generational perspectives and preferences with regards to receiving feedback in the workforce. This particular session in our summer symposium was one of the most heavily attended sessions, multi-generations in the workforce. And so we thought we'd shine a deeper spotlight on feedback and why it's so important and how different generations receive it, they give it, what are our preferences, and all those types of things. I look at feedback as a gift. Team, I don't know if you guys do, but as I've advanced in my career, I see it a little bit differently. I didn't always in my younger years. So we'll be talking all things feedback today. We are bringing together this group of all-stars from Gen Z to Millennials to Gen X and baby boomers. Hi, team. It's great to see you.
Good morning,
And
Heidi.
good morning.
Hello.
Hello. And we will be talking about what it really takes to be effective, to receive it, and all of those types of things. So to get us started, I would love to hear from our younger generation. Simone, I'm going to ask you, just so we're all singing from the same sheet of music, feedback means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. What does it mean to you? What's the purpose of feedback?
For me, especially because I'm so young and I consider this my first real job. Everybody knows I used to be a sales girl at Madewell. I was selling jeans. So this is a far cry from that. So for me, feedback is a huge learning opportunity. Like first and foremost, receiving feedback, whether it's from my peers and colleagues or my supervisors, it is a way for me to figure out what I'm good at, what I can improve at, and where to move forward.
Awesome. Alexa, you're in our millennial generation. What do you think feedback is to you?
Yeah, I think I'd have to echo that. I think communication is really key. Getting good feedback is what helps you grow. I know there can tend to be maybe more of a negative connotation or a fear with it, maybe in the younger generation. But I think that when it's done appropriately, especially in the younger generation, I know we appreciate like the quick feedback, right? If it's through online or through Zoom, like, hey, great job, just the little fuel to keep you going. I think it's very productive and, appreciated by millennials.
Chris Timmel, our Chief Operating Officer.
Yeah, I hate it.
Do you really?
No, I'm being facetious. I think when I was a little bit, newer in my career, giving feedback was not as much of I want to call it science, right? It wasn't very well studied or practiced back then, or maybe I had bad leaders or leaders who didn't know what they were doing, what have you. But to me, generally speaking, because this is what it felt like, right? Back in the day, I'm sure we're going to talk about it, right? It's you're going out, you're doing your job, and blah, 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 blah. And then all of a sudden it's annual review time and boom, it's like, wait a minute, well, hold on a second. I'm number one in the country. What do you mean I'm not doing a good enough job? I don't understand. Right? Why didn't you tell me this 6 months ago? Right. So that's from a corrective or negative feedback perspective, right? Like that leave alone zap sort of methodology was very pervasive back in the day. Less of that now. And positive feedback, this is probably just a me thing. I don't know if it's a generational thing. I definitely don't I'm uncomfortable receiving positive feedback. So that's
fascinating. Have you figured out why?
Yeah, probably some childhood trauma.
Can unpack that. Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No,
different call. Yeah.
No, seriously, like if you think about it, and Marion's probably going to have a very similar sort of response, right? Like, we were brought up differently, right? And and I you know, we will never forget this. And I don't think my mom and dad are not on this webinar today. So, but I will never, ever forget this incident, because it was like really formative for me. And I got it might have been 7th or 8th grade. And I got like a 98 on a math test, go figure. Right. And I brought it home. What do you think my dad said?
Why wasn't it 100?
Yeah, no, what specifically, what happened to the other 2 points?
Oh, stars.
Right. Yeah, he doesn't
High
remember that at all.
standards.
He doesn't remember that at all, by the way. But but I think I truly think that so I think that kind of formed in me, and to some other folks I know, just really the foundation of, right, like, tell me what I need to fix and I'll fix it. If I don't hear from you, I assume I'm doing great.
Interesting. Yeah, so generationally, Gen X, it seems like a lot of us, I'm in that generation too, we're used to like annualized feedback, once and done, and then it's, bye, see you later. So it can hit hard or it can hit, soft. It just depends. And now I think we've moved into, from what I hear you saying, Alexa and Simone, Miriam, you can round us out. It seems like we're into, people want feedback all the time. We need it all the time. Employees perform better when we get feedback. So it's not just an annualized hit and let's go. Marion, weigh in. What's feedback to you? What's the purpose of it?
Not that much older than Chris Timmel. I just want to point that.
That's right.
I'd like to make that very clear. But yeah, we were raised with an annual review, and the annual reviews now, where they have, your strengths and your weaknesses, really the annual review I grew up with was just telling me what I need to improve on. What am I doing wrong? Right. And it was literally, I'd never had a conversation about it before. And here's what you need to do to fix. And it was always tied to an increase or performance. So it wasn't just, hey, FYI, you can work on this. It was literally, you need to do X, Y, Z, and you would get a raise of X amount, or you will eventually get, considered for promotion. So it was never just, I want to improve and how do I get better at what I do and how do I, change some skill sets. It was, here's our annual, it's very organized, and I kind of prefer it that way because that's how I was raised. I don't want to hear on a Tuesday afternoon, what I have to fix for Wednesday. Like, I'm just not built like that. And when Timmel jokingly said I hate it, I'm like, whatever, can I just do my job? Like, that is kind of my go-to from how I was raised. I just want to do my job. And so that's where my boomerness will come out is, okay, boomer, just go do your job in your corner and call us when you're done. Right. So that's
fascinating.
Yeah. That feedback is not received well by me on a Tuesday afternoon.
But the younger generations want to give it to you.
Right.
You're like,
yeah,
like, no,
yeah,
no, I don't
no,
want to
you.
receive
No.
it.
Call me
Exactly.
on November 1st, which
That's
happens
right.
to be my annual. We'll talk then. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. So you can already see kind of the separation, with, how you were raised, how you're used to receiving feedback is how you want to give feedback. And it's just different, just one and done versus I want it sprinkled every Tuesday, right? Or every Wednesday or every Thursday and Friday, so I can know where I sit. Yeah, I'm kind of in between, even though I sit in your generation, Chris Timmel X, I sit in between. I want it annually, but I also want it sprinkled in between. And that can be difficult for leaders to lead different ways. How do we do it? What's the right way? I saw some of the feedback in the chat that there's, personality profiling, DISC matters, how people, where they sit, are they introvert, extrovert, what have you, but it does make a difference. So have you thought about what channels are the best way to receive feedback? There's like the text medium, email. We'll say, let's start with positive feedback, and we don't have to go in order. You guys just sprinkle it in. Is there a right, wrong, or indifferent?
So I'll give you the technical answer of how you're supposed to give feedback. Right.
There you go.
So specifically, you mentioned positive. I'll give you the technical answer. You're supposed to give positive feedback. Positive feedback, well, recognition should be in public, right? feedback around like a job well done, or work that you're doing this week. It should be, it should be ongoing. It should be in person. But with that said, it should be customized to the way the recipient prefers to receive it, right? Like if I get a better response, right? If I sometimes, depending on who, like I'll get a better response if I send a thumbs up text message to somebody, right? Who's, maybe a little bit younger than a phone call, right? Like if I call, pick on Simone, like if I'll call Simone on Thursday to say, hey, listen, the piece that you wrote around the exit interview thing was fantastic, was amazing. Like the chances of her picking up the phone are slim, right? But if I text her, but if I text her, right, she's, she responds. And I find that as you whether it be the person or the age of the person, etc., like it is you're supposed to give them meet them where they are, I guess. And so as a leader, you have to know where they are.
I love that. Actually, when I was on board at 2Puzzle, they asked in our questionnaire, what does recognition mean to you? How do you like to receive recognition? And it was like monetary, like a cute gift card, or is it to shout somebody out, publicly? Some people, maybe that is tough for them. They don't want to be so public with their achievements. So I really echo what Timmel said. I think it's really important to figure out, of course, there could be trends just depending on the generation, but I think everybody's a little bit different. So really leveraging, I think Jennifer said in the chat, which I love, utilizing DISC and personality things to that effect really helps you understand like how you can maximize that stuff, because maybe you're spending a lot of time calling somebody and it means that much more just getting a nice text, right? So it's really good.
And I think that, that's interesting too, because we were talking beforehand as a group that although we are in these kind of generational categories, we blur into other categories. And Lisa on the chat just said, she's, I'm assuming, older and she likes a text. Well, some of it is we do learn and grow, but tapping into, maybe not just assuming that a boomer only wants a phone call or an annual review, but asking the question like Puzzle does, how do you like to receive praise and recognition? Because some people don't like public recognition regardless of generation. So, and some thrive on it. But I think, you start with generationally, like you're not going to ask a boomer, some technology stuff, right? I do prefer text. I don't use my phone for phone calls, but yeah. So it's interesting that there's those things we kind of naturally gravitate towards, and then there's the personal preference that we've evolved maybe because of what job we're in. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I think for me, the job I'm in specifically plays a huge role in how I like to receive feedback, because my job is I'm a copywriter and editor. So like I mostly spend my time writing or reading. And so getting a phone call totally disrupts me. If my phone rings, I am thrown off. I can't finish the article that I was writing. I have to jump to something else. But if I get a text or an email telling me I did a good job, that's great. I can screenshot that. I can put that in my little folder for later. So that way, whenever because I think a lot of people in my generation feel a lot of imposter syndrome. I'm often the youngest person on a call. People often will be like, Simone, how old are you? And I say, I'm 25. And they kind of laugh. And I'm like, I know, I'm so 25. And that's crazy. But for me, like being able to go back to that tangible reminder of like, oh, my coworkers or my supervisors think that I did a good job on this, and this. I can go back and I can look at that. And that really helps beat that imposter syndrome. So that's super important.
So I hear there's no wrong way to write a Reese's, right? With regards to positive feedback, you guys, every generation likes it anyway. You can, unless you're one of the rare breeds that doesn't like public feedback where that's so foreign to me because I just want you to tell me how fantastic I am in front of everybody all the time, and more, and tell me more.
Heidi, you're fantastic.
See, exactly. Thank you. Yes, exactly. So, but positive looks very similar across generations. So that should be very reassuring to leaders, is there's really no wrong way to give somebody positive feedback. Now, if it's constructive, it should look a little bit different. I've been the recipient, not the precipitant, of someone like dropping a bomb in email and giving me feedback about myself and then walking away, and that feels horrible. So what generationally, doesn't matter, again, you guys ping pong, but what's the best method for you? What resonates with you in receiving constructive feedback? Is it, Simone, I know you mentioned don't interrupt my flow of work. So do you want to receive constructive feedback via text or via email?
I definitely don't mind receiving constructive feedback via text or email. I think that I have a very unique role because I am very project-based, which means I am constantly receiving feedback and I'm constantly seeking feedback. So when I'm writing an article or putting together a one-sheeter or creating a presentation, I am sending that draft off to whoever it's going to, specifically for them to critique it. So I really don't mind getting bombarded with some more critical feedback over text or email, or if they want to hop on a Zoom call and, you know, take a red pen to my work, that's also cool. I think for me, like I said, I'm really seeking feedback, especially critical feedback, to get better. So I really don't necessarily have a preference, although a phone call is typically not my favorite method of communication in general.
You're a unicorn, I will say, for your generation. Professionally, you're very mature, and not everyone sits in that particular seat. How do you not, Simone, this one's to you. How do you not read between the lines with what somebody's saying? How do you not misinterpret tone and those types of things? Like, I'm not good at that I would have done it this way, or I don't like this. If I were to read that, how do you not interpret or misinterpret?
I think for me, it just is I think it's really a product of just having come out of college not that long ago. So I'm very used to feedback coming from professors as a way to grow and develop me and help me learn. So I tend to approach feedback from coworkers in a very similar way. I also see it as helping me grow and learn. And I think I also just try to assume best intentions from everybody all the time. I don't think that there's any coworkers. I really hope that I don't have any coworkers who, whenever they've been giving me feedback, are like trying to tear me down. I don't assume that anybody would be trying to tear me down. So yeah, I think I really try to read everything very neutrally. I assume that, I assume if their tone comes across more harsh than I would have written it, I just assume that that's maybe a miscommunication over text. And I also think I saw somebody in the chat say something about emojis like earlier.
Yeah.
If you use emojis, that's great. That's amazing. That's such an easy way to cue your tone.
I like it.
Change. A thumbs up is passive aggressive now. Like you people are killing me.
It is?
Well, I'm wondering what kind of emoji
gosh.
you'd get with constructive feedback, you know, that you could get some different options there.
Right,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if you throw a little smiley face at the end of it, then I'm just going to assume it's
Sure.
positive, constructive criticism. I will take it. I will take that smiley face, or I will take that thumbs up, and I will assume that you don't mean anything negative by
All
it.
right.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. The thumbs
that.
up thing. I was like, what do you mean? I'm not being passive aggressive. I'm aggressive, but that wasn't it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not what my intent was. That's awesome.
I like that. I mean, for my generation, I think I would like a hybrid of both, to be honest. I think we've all been in a position where maybe you get a random meeting slapped on your calendar with a vague title, and you kind of just wonder, oh my goodness, like what's the topic of that or whatnot. So I've appreciated having leaders that send you a quick, blip in the moment to just say, hey, I think there's some things we can dig into here. So you kind of understand what to expect and then have that live conversation, because I think the point of constructive feedback is to make sure they understand where you're coming from and that there's some good change coming from it. And I think sometimes in emails, even in social media, there's a lot that can get mistranslated in those situations. So it's always helpful to just come in the back end and just make sure they're understanding your intent, you're on the same page, and where do we go from here. So I've always appreciated kind of both.
Yeah, I think that's cool. The one thing I was thinking of is that with boomers and we're more aware of the hierarchy of a company than I think our younger peers are. Like the way we grew up is I didn't get feedback from anyone. It all flowed up through our leaders and then back down. And now it's a lot more open between generations and between roles and stuff. So people are giving more constructive feedback, positive and negative, or improving than they were before, right? It used to just go up and down. So I had struggled with that initially with like, well, talk to my boss, right? Good or bad, you know, and then come down. So now it's, especially at Puzzle, it's a lot more open. We give feedback a lot. And you know, and it matters what the peer group feels about what you're doing. Whereas I don't think as a boomer, it really came into play in the first, you know, couple 100 years of my career. So yeah.
You know, I think so I think the question on the table is, you know, getting constructive feedback.
That's right.
Again, you know, you got to meet the person where they are. But as the person giving the feedback, I think you should, even though you know where the person is, maybe they like a text or maybe they like an email, right? I think you owe it to that person to make sure that you are not misinterpreted, right? And then you can have an open conversation about, you know, whatever that constructive feedback is. Now, if it's very serious, obviously there's going to be a meeting or a phone call or something. You know, if it's a one-off, it can be a quick like, hey, change this. So they're kind of like degrees, right? But I think it is the sender of the message's responsibility to ensure that the recipient of the message, whatever that message is, consumes and digests the true and full meaning of that message. It's not, and this is for all of us leaders. It is absolutely not the responsibility of the recipient of the message to take your message the right way. It is not their job to understand what you mean. It's your job to make sure that they understand what you mean, and to do that and to confirm understanding. It's hard to have that over text or over email.
I agree.
So
I agree. So to put teeth to that, let's talk example. Like if we were sitting in this room as we are right now, and you guys wanted to give me feedback on how I showed up on a particular call and I was disengaged, or I wasn't, you know, acting like I was interested, or my energy level was down, it brought the whole temperature of the room down. What does that actually look like? Any of you guys? How would you do that? So you as the receiver or you as the giver, you know, are clear. It's kind of hidden no matter which generation I fall in. You're definitely not texting me this, please, dear Lord, don't do that. Never.
If I could, it would start with, so my assumption is we were in a meeting, you did a thing, we were in the room together, and I had some points, some margin notes for you. I'd pull you aside and say, what'd you think? How do you think you did? So tell me what you did really, really well. And tell me what you think you could improve upon.
Okay.
All right. And then I would probably, more likely than not, you would say the thing that I thought that you would have to agree upon. And if you didn't, I would probably disagree with one of the things that you said that you could have done better. I would say, you know what, I disagree. I think you knocked that one out of the park. But what about this? What do you think about this? What do you think about that? Right? And really kind of have an open conversation about it to change that. Does that make sense? That's how I would do it.
So you start with a question.
Yeah, always. so
Fascinating.
generally for everything, I always start with a question.
Mhm. Good. So they can self-assess themselves.
Yeah.
Alexa?
Because otherwise I'm a big meanie, according to some people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I pretty much echo that. I think the only other thing that, I think about is just making sure that person's in the right headspace to receive it. So kind of tying back to what he said about a question, but, asking, how they're doing and where they're at. Are you in a good spot to talk about this? Because maybe you're catching them in between two priorities where their head's not going to be in the game to talk about it, or vice versa. So giving that person the opportunity to think about, are they in the right headspace to receive it? And then also giving them the opportunity to bring their accountability to the table and say, what did you think about this scenario? And that helps you pivot on how to deliver that message, just depending on how they think they did. I think that that's a really good point.
All right, Marion, be specific. If I did not show up well to a meeting, what would you specifically tell me? Right?
I have gone down the Zoom chat road with those. I don't like email. I think they can be misinterpreted. And especially someone that and we have a relationship with, getting on a Zoom, because we're not in the room together. We're remote, and having it be very personal and not punitive at all. Just like I like what Timmel and Alexa said, that it's a conversation and getting to the bottom of it, because probably like the example you used, Hyde, you probably knew there was something off in that meeting, right? So you left that. We're all professionals, and we left that going, something didn't happen, something didn't click. So you're already thinking about it. And as Alexa said, if you're already in the weeds with that, it may not be the best time. And you can't get that in an email or a text. So if you go into Zoom, I can read body language. I can see if you're receiving it, because sometimes you give feedback and they're just like, nope, that's not what happened. Yeah, let's talk about it, right? So
Right.
it is what happened. So, and I think seeing that if you're not actually receiving it well, tabling it, I mean, Chris Timmel and I have had those kind of conversations, and there's been times where I'm just like, listen, I'm not in a good place to take your feedback right now.
Fair.
Like, I'm just not. I'm mad. I'm not. It's bouncing off me. And when I get like that, I
Fair.
know I'm just not going to take this well. It's going to get ugly. I'm going to respond inappropriately. I'm going to get mad and loud. So, I think Zoom is a really good, if you're not in the same room with somebody, if you have the opportunity to do it face to face or in a Zoom, so you can read body language and really because it should end up being a better relationship at the end of it. You shouldn't be like leaving that relationship contentious or someone feeling, completely unhappy. So I think that, to me, that is the way that crosses generations, is being a human and not being, like, have that human touch versus an email, and then forgetting. Sometimes your intent is to circle back and you don't, because you get busy or they get busy, and then they're left spinning out of control. And that's happened with people here that I worked with at Puzzle, where maybe I didn't make something clear, and they spent the whole weekend agonizing over what I said, and I forgot about it because it wasn't that big of a deal to me. And I left them spinning because I never circled back, which I don't want to do to people.
Simone?
I don't know. This is a hard one for me because I'm usually not in the feedback giver position. I'm
Fair.
usually the one receiving it, but I think I'm flipping it around. If I were the one receiving the feedback, and therefore this is informing what I would do if I were giving the feedback, I think if I were showing up to a meeting and I were like super disengaged and I were getting feedback on it, I would love to be asked, like, are you good? Like, what's up? What's wrong? Like, is something wrong? I feel like if I'm showing up, and I think this is the case for, I don't know, I've never really worked with anybody who, like, here at Puzzle, who feels like super disengaged when they're showing up to meetings or anything like that. So I feel like if any of my fellow puzzlers were showing up and seeming really like out of it, I would be like, oh, like, are they okay? Like, is something going on with them? And I think that's really what Marion was saying about, like, being human, like leading with the human side of things. I always appreciate like, are you good? Like, there's definitely been times where I've hopped on a marketing call and afterwards the big Timmel will text me and be like, are you sick? Like, you seem like tired. And I'm like, yeah, actually I am sick. Like, how did you know? And I appreciate that. Like, I'm like, yeah, I know I'm like probably not as engaged as I could be right now because I totally have a fever or whatever. And that's always
Fascinating.
good.
It's a good
I
point,
just-
though,
and
like
I just got
knowing
feedback.
people and then seeing them off on a specific day. Like I've used this statement that we're not going to judge somebody based on of their career based on one negative interaction or
Mhm.
one
Mm.
meeting that you show
Fair.
up poorly. Like we're not
Mhm.
judged by that one bad experience.
Mhm.
So, and I think making that clear when you're giving that feedback, regardless of generation, is listen, this doesn't change how I feel about you, but something's wrong. What is it?
Yeah.
Is it personal? And being a boomer, I don't want to talk to you about what's going wrong in my personal life. Like I don't. Like
Right.
if I'm not showing up well, just tell me and then move on. I'm not going to go into the armchair psychology with you. I don't like it. But other generations do. They do want to talk about it. So I'm more of a leave me alone, let me do my job, and I'll call you when I'm feeling better kind of gal. So
Yeah.
But even that is important because you're acknowledging,
True.
right, that maybe something is not going great at the moment.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Talk
Yeah.
about it, but even acknowledging that is like a
Mhm.
good step.
Yeah.
yeah, and I'm being supportive of it. I mean, everyone's going through something, and I think as a leader, understanding that and that, work is important, but it's not always the most important thing
Mm.
every day to everybody. And, being supportive of that is as a boomer, something I've had to evolve into because that's not what I grew up with. No one cared. Like when I was younger and I was working, I had kids. As a woman in the office, I never talked about my family issues. If my kids were sick, it was hidden. Like
Yeah.
that's not the company you want to have. People are people and they all are going through something.
Mhm.
So,
But that was just like those times, right? You know what I
oh
mean?
yeah.
Like
And that's
nobody's
where I
gonna
was raised.
yeah.
No one
Like
cared.
it was
Yeah.
and I mean appreciate, and Heidi, you'll remember this, like there were television commercials when we were growing up. It's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are? Like that was a serious, like on TV, like television would be reminding parents who are probably
You
sitting
have
in the
kids.
house smoking,
Right. Right.
right?
Where are they?
drinking a
You have
Budweiser,
kids
say, hey,
somewhere.
are your
Yeah.
children at home? Or are they
Mhm.
Right.
running around in the streets still?
That's right.
Right. So yeah, so like,
Mhm.
yeah, no, like we were I read some like were raised feral.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
That's
we're feral.
right.
I was
Whereas
feral.
Totally.
whereas I 100% know how Alexa and Simone were brought up. Like we knew where they were at 10 p.m. not 10 p.m. bed. But first of all, they're asleep.
Right.
Okay. You know what I mean? Like 7:15 is dinner, like going all the way back. Right. So, so like we were not, I don't say we weren't cared for, but we really weren't, we were,
Very
just,
independent.
yeah,
Touche.
exactly.
That's right.
Either
Thrown-
make it or you don't.
That's right.
Exactly. And we wrap these kids in bubble wrap to protect them from
That's right.
us lunatics.
That's right. Exactly. Yes.
I
We
just
grew
wish
up
I
in the
could
day.
put little emojis on these comments because
I
the
know.
interaction of the comments is so great.
It
So
is.
thank you,
Totally
guys.
distracted
You
by
wanna
the
give them
comments.
I know, I keep
feedback.
reading, I'm
Keep it
reading the
up.
comments.
Yes, we want to give y'all feedback and we can't. Marion's not quick enough. Oh my gosh. Yes, we grew up in the day, Chris, where it was like your parents would tell you, get the heck out of the house at 10 o'clock and I don't want to see you until the dinner bell rings, until the sun starts to set at dusk, right? So it was just like, go figure it out. Feral, whatever y'all want to call it.
Summertime
And that
punishment.
applied to work too, though.
Yeah.
Like if you think about it, like I literally went in and did my job, and unless I messed up royally, I didn't hear from anybody. Like
Right.
no one, there was none of that. There was no ongoing feedback. It was literally show up and do your job,
Mhm.
and then work really
And-
hard, and you might get promoted. So yeah.
Exactly.
Exactly. When you think about, I mean, post-pandemic, Marion and Chris, you guys are talking about, and myself, I'm thinking about, I'm used to just receiving feedback and just come in and do your work. And it seems callous and hard sometimes. And then our younger generations, like I have children that are, 15 and 10. You want to talk about wrap and bubble wrap times 100. Like I need to know where they are at all moments of the day. I track where they are on, Life app and all these types of things. It's bananas. But post-pandemic, we're not only more isolated because a lot of us work remotely, but the importance of knowing where you sit inside of an organization, like how am I doing, is really important. It is. We can't just sit here not knowing, how we're doing. I'm curious what your thoughts are, just, post COVID, more individuals want to work remotely, more people do work remotely. It can leave people feeling very isolated. Marion, to your point, I'm used to just coming to work and I'm just going to work and I don't need you to know about all my problems. But here's the truth, my friends. Work now is our church, is our counselor. You got my armchair, right? It's my exercise facility. It's where I do my work. It's where I have my best friends and it's where I'm going to party. Yes. I mean, work now is supposed to be all those things, whether or not that's right, but that's essentially where people want us to be. So how does feedback fall into that, across generations?
Yeah, I mean, I think the newer generations have had a great influence on companies with saying, "Hey, I want to be proud of where I work." Maybe not necessarily like you have to know everything about me, but I want to be a part. I don't want to be a cog in the wheel. I want to be part of something bigger than myself.
Mhm.
I think that's been a great influence. So, you see organizations maybe like Puzzle where, we have certain funds to Tim, well, you can speak to this a little bit better, but I think sponsoring like adding trees and things of that nature,
Yeah.
right? Little things like that I think the newer generation appreciates that because it's not just clocking in and clocking out. I get to be a part of something that not only maybe they care more about my family and it helps me be better for my family, but maybe I'm going to do something better for society. I think that's been really pivotal just for all companies, especially post-COVID and how companies responded to that really had a lot of organizations sitting back and saying, like, what do I need to do differently to not just treat my people like just employees? Where do we find that balance of it doesn't have to be their life, but they're more than just somebody that's clocking in and clocking out to support my company.
Mhm.
Yeah. I think that's a great point, Alexa. I think it might even be if it's on the exit survey report that just came out. It was in another survey that we put out. People want to like feel like they are aligned with the values of the organization. Right. So people want to, so people and it is much more important for the younger generations, right, than it is for the older generations to be aligned with the company's values, right, as an employee. I mean, right, like, I mean, it just is what it is. I mean, certainly there are, folks that are on either side of that, but for the most part, it is absolutely critical for an organization to have, for an organization's values to align with Alpha, Z, and millennials, right? It's just like because if you hear it, you see it, you read it, right? Spend any time in Reddit, as I do, and you will see that people just the younger folks, younger generations, assuming they're not bots and trolls, really putting it out there that, hey, my company is doing this, I'm out, right? So not to this trigger warning. This is not a political statement. It is just the latest thing that you see, right? So Target recently announced that they are modifying their DE&I program, right? Not eliminating it, modifying it. They're calling it belonging or something like that. Of course, it goes out into the internet and it's Target's eliminating DEI because of everything that you see everywhere. And just hop on good old TikTok, while you still can, and you will see people, you will see Target employees quitting loudly, right, and giving that as a reason because they feel like the company is no longer aligned with their values, and people are, and to that same similar point, people are changing where they're spending their dollars, right, these days as a result of some of the things that you see out there. So yeah, it is important for companies to have values and for them to, if they're going to attract and retain the best quality talent, right, they have to stand up and live by values that align with their team members.
For
I
sure.
think
Yeah, I mean,
feedback is like, oh,
go ahead, Simone.
I was gonna say, I feel like feedback is like one of the prime places you really see values, like you see the company's values a lot. At least I do in the feedback that you receive. I feel like when I'm sitting down with my leaders for like a one-on-one, or when I am talking to my team members about like this article that I wrote and like what the high points of it like are, I feel like that is really where I see a lot of Puzzle's values. Like we really value world-class service. Like we really want to listen to our clients, and we think it's really, really important to work closely with them to provide the best possible service. And even though I'm in marketing and I'm not like, directly providing a service to our clients, that is still something that I guess is, it's still front of mind whenever I am creating content and in the feedback that I receive as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, we talk a lot about, feedback and, one-on-one or maybe from a performance perspective, but I mean, we're living in the social media age, right? So some feedback is also what you're seeing on the internet about the organization, maybe you're applying to, right? I know before I go to a restaurant, I'm looking them up on Yelp. I'm looking at the pictures. And if I don't like the quality of the pictures I'm seeing, I'm not going. Like I'm that person, right? So I think also the newer generations really leverage that to be vocal or to make an informed decision about where they want to work or how they feel about where they work, looking at all of that online, or to Timmel's point, going on TikTok and being vocal about your beliefs or your values.
Simone, you mentioned values. We have, our values here at Puzzler Cares. It's just our little acronym that just makes it really easy for people to understand what are our standards, and it's collaborate, accountability, relationship, empathy, and smile. I'm sure you guys have that because I just breezed through it in 5 seconds. But I look at values like an anchor. So when you're trying to give feedback, you're anchored and tethered to A is accountability. So if Heidi didn't show up well, or I was waiting for Marion to give me something, so now we're on a meeting, I don't have what I need, and I want to blame her, as I like to do. Like what's the real conversation? Like, where is your level of accountability, Heidi, and moving in front and asking Marion what, for what you need, as opposed to just sitting idle and waiting. Yes. So I really feel like if you don't, as an organization, have values, that really is point one where you need to get rooted and anchor your people, especially because then your leadership team can look around the landscape and know exactly where feedback needs. Because if someone's showing up and they're not collaborative here at Puzzle HR, we know what the problem is, or they lack empathy or what have you, right?
And I think that that's especially unifying across generations because as a boomer or an older worker, it literally has always just been, do you do your job well? Right. And, Puzzle, we have our cares values. So we do anchor it to those values. So now I can't just show up and be a jerk, but get my job done and think I'm okay. Right. I still have to live those values. Whereas that kind of crosses generations and helps us be anchored to that. And yeah, you did a great job. Your project was done. Simone, you did a great job. Your output was great, but no one wants to work with you. So, that can't work, right? Which is not true, by the way, because she's spectacular. But I'm just saying, like, we have to anchor that. It's not good enough to just show up and be good at your specific role in a silo. Whereas it used to be okay to do that, and now it isn't. And getting everyone on the same page is so important, and making that cares value at Puzzle, it has unified across generations. So I think it helps with that feedback that's not specific to the output of a job. Like you still have to be a human being, you still have to care, still have to smile, like those types of things. So I love that we have that. And it's funny because I could not rattle them off. I remember the accountability and the smile one, but but yeah, we go back to that. So I love that. Thanks, Heidi.
Yeah, for sure. It does. I mean, listen, collaboration is where we're sitting right now. This is why we're trying to have this conversation. We have, 4+ generations in the workforce today. Every one of us deals with things different. We like to receive feedback, give feedback differently. But if we're all working towards collaborating, that's really the impact. So if someone's not showing up collaboratively, it doesn't matter what they do, Marion, to your point. It doesn't matter if I'm in sales or I'm in service. Dear gracious God, can we all just work together, please? It's not us against you. It's not payroll against benefits. It's everyone working together collaboratively. And what does that look like and how you actually show up? And that's the feedback that needs to be given. Okay. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask a fun question for you guys, for our viewers. And I want anyone to weigh in on this one. Tell us about a time where you received feedback. Give us a situation that made you disengage, like positive or negative. I'm assuming it's going to be negative. What was the feedback? Maybe it was the medium in which it was given. Why'd you disengage? Shoot.
I'm laughing
I'm gonna-
because I
I'm
know what
gonna s-
Marion's going to say.
No,
Oh,
you don't. I'm
gosh.
gonna go to the way back. So I worked at a different company and I had a great year. I got promoted. I was leading a large team and I got my review and my review was not great. It was I felt very nitpicky and like, the things I had worked were like department level changing jobs that I had completed and improved the company bottom line and people's lives in my organization, but the review was awful. Like I was just fixated on it. But I got a huge raise. So it was like a 12% raise, which is unheard of there, right? And I was just like, and it was one of those things that what someone was saying to me didn't align with anything. It was just so out of left field that I like disengaged. I was like, you know what? This doesn't make me want to work harder. It makes no sense. There was no conversation. It was just like a review handed to me that I read on my own. And like, I think I learned a lot from that, that first of all, never blindside anybody in a review. That you should have the conversations ahead of time. I don't care what generation. And what you say and what you do have to be in alignment. Like you can't just random out of left field give feedback like would you call it, Timmel, like stop and shoot somebody and
Jeez, right.
like
Yeah, leave alone Zap.
yeah, leave alone and zap. And I was just like,
Right.
that was crazy. Like and that was probably 30 years ago, like literally 30 years ago, and it still sits with me of something I would never do. And if I do, and I do it to anyone on this call or ever, and you bring it to my attention, I'm going to apologize because it's awful to feel so confused. So I think that was one that made me disengage because it just didn't make any sense to me. And it was so out of left field and random. And as a boomer, things need to make sense. Like I did a good job, I got promoted, and I got a bad review. Makes no sense. So
And you got a big
is
raise.
that what you're
Like,
looking for? And I got a big raise. It was-
polar opposites,
and the funny
right.
thing is, my husband boomer says, "What do you care? You got a big raise." Like, you know what I mean? I'm like, because I do care. I
Right.
care about all of it. So I don't, that was mine.
Interesting. Is there anything that you can think of that would have made that conversation different? Like,
Yeah.
feedback
I-
what?
Yeah, I think after the fact, or even instead of just handing it and walking away, if they had said, which came out later, because I'm not a quiet person. So I went over afterwards, like a week of thinking about it and going, this makes no sense to me. What happened? And she said to me, oh, well, I'm looking at you to be the next manager of the department. To do that, these things have to happen. But that wasn't in the review. You know what I mean? It was
Fascinating.
just very, so yeah. So once she put it in context, I was like, oh, okay, thank you. So what I did was okay in my current role, but it wouldn't be okay in the next role. So that
Interesting.
was that. So I don't know if I took up too much time, but just thought that would be interesting.
Yeah, for sure. Solid communication could have really helped that whole thing. Like when you're the one delivering, Chris, you mentioned this, like it's the giver that needs to give the right information. We have to, lead with, here's why I'm giving you this feedback, right? Here's the impact of what you just did, the behavior that I saw, whatever it happens to be. So we're not leaving people, Marion, to your point, spiraling out over the weekend. Right? That's not what we want. We want them to be clear. We want to be able to engage. How did you receive that? What questions do you have? How does that land with you? Let me know your thoughts. Anyone else? Feedback that made you disengage?
I have same situation for me. I had worked for a company that did raises every 6 months. So I remember I was in a new department, 6 months, I was rocking it. I was doing overtime. I was going the extra mile, and I did that because that's the person I am. I want to do those things, right? But I had that review, and it was just very much like, well, you meet expectations. It just was very blindsiding. So for someone that's a hard worker, you've got to be clearer, quicker with those individuals, with anyone really, but especially people working hard to say, you're on track or you're not. Nobody should be blindsided by a review, because then really you kind of step back and go, well, why am I working as hard as I am? Right.
So
So
this is
Yeah.
super interesting that you say that, Alexa. You said meet expectations and you were bummed out at that result, right?
mhm,
Yeah.
Right? Like, so it's you didn't meet expectations, you met expectations, or you exceeded expectations, right?
mhm.
So meet expectations that's supposed to be great. Like that's supposed to be great. If like only maybe 20% of the team or maybe less should get like the exceed
True.
expectations kind
I was
of thing.
definitely
Is
not 20. I
right.
was in that 20.
It's
You're exceptional, Timmel, just so you know.
Right. Right.
but
FYI, yeah.
so I think that like it's just super interesting because we talk about this all the time, right? I mean, like in this sort of field where like the annual review field, etc., where like people who get the meet expectations or like a 3.5 instead of a 5, whatever it is, right? They feel assaulted,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? They feel assaulted, and so we have to be cognizant of the scaling, right, and how people understand the scale. Matt?
And be aware that the only thing I hate about meeting expectations versus not is maybe my expectation of Alexa is that she works that hard, stays late, is the person I go to person. So when she's meeting those expectations, but then you look at me and I'm lazy and I don't stay late and I don't work hard, but you don't expect much from me. And I get meets expectations as well because that was the expectation.
You have to
It's
be, yeah,
terrible.
as
It's terrible. It's so
as
demotivating for your star performers.
yeah,
For
Yes.
so
sure.
as a leadership team, or as a like you have to, like I feel like you almost should, and this is not a practice that I've done, so I'm not going to say that this is what I do. I think as a leadership team or as a leader, you've got to explain the scale to your team. Like this is what these things mean,
Right.
right? One, two, it's
Mhm.
got to be consistent across the company. Okay. It has to be consistent across the company because I've seen this happen where, hold on a second, this idiot exceeds expectation, and now he goes into the upper right hand corner of the 9 box,
Uh-huh.
and I get meets expectation, and I'm in the experts in place bottom right hand corner of the 9 box or whatever it is. Like, what are you talking about, right? So I think this is a much bigger conversation about, feedback, rewards, recognition, that goes across the generational divide, as it were. But I think fundamentally, like when you have a rewards recognition program or a feedback program, like you really, really have to do a very good job organizationally of explaining the metrics to your folks, and you have to be consistent. Because if you're not consistent, to Marion's point, if hey, that person's they're punching at 9 and punch out at 5, I didn't expect anything more of them, so they're meeting my expectations. But Alexa's in at 7 and leaves at 7, and that's what I expect her to do, so she's meeting my expectations, right?
Yeah.
Like you can't, like you have to be, as a leader, you have to be cognizant of that fact, right?
Mhm.
And so like, might I not care about meeting expectations or exceeding expectations if I get a good raise, right? Whatever. But might Alexa, like, but Alexa and Simone might really care about that, right? And so I think this whole and I know we're tight on time, so I'll shut up. But like when you're as a company, as an organization, when you have these scales, right, you have to be, you have to train your leaders how to use them, right? And you have to educate the receivers of feedback on how the tool is being used. I've seen it weaponized in other places. No,
Yeah.
no bueno, as we say.
That's right.
Well, and to Marion's point, be consistent too, right? This shouldn't be the first time they're hearing this feedback. So whether
Right.
you give them a call or if you're Simone, you send an emoji of, I don't know what kind of emoji you're gonna get, but you get
That's right.
something right. Keep
Some sort of
going. Right?
emoji.
Yeah.
Something. Yes. Something you said, Tim, will spark something. This is just a generalized statement, but in leadership, when you're running a team meeting, do not punish the entire team for one person's sins or one person's missteps, right? We see this all the time. I was in sales for a very long time, and we would just get, I mean, raked over the coals for 3 of our low performers. And I'm sitting over here like, what? I've exceeded every single month. Like, why are you yelling at me? So I think if you're a leader, I'm convinced if you're a leader, you need to pull those individuals aside. And I understand the reason why sometimes leaders just want to make a blanket statement to the team. There's one thing to like set the expectation. Let's make sure we're all singing from the same sheet of music, but then my individual conversations with Marion or Timmel need to be with Marion and Timmel and not the team. I don't need to punish everybody for just a few people's missteps or low expectations, right?
Yeah, tough. It's tough to pull off, right? It's like,
It is.
it's, you know, it's like you're the sports team coach,
Mm,
right? You
tricky.
yell at the whole team,
It's tricky.
right? Yeah, you yell at the whole team and everybody does laps, right? Like everybody does laps
Right.
because Alexa was late or because Alexa dropped that ball.
Right.
So everybody, but by the way, terrible. I get it. And you should not bring that into the workplace, but like it could be habitual for some folks because
Sure.
that's just the way they've been brought up.
That's right. Okay, so as we wrap up, I know we have a quick 3 minutes here. If you had a single word based on your generation that defines good feedback for you as a recipient to receive it, if you could think about as a baby boomer, as a Gen Xer, Z, millennial, whatever, what would it look like for you? How do you want to receive it in a phrase or a word? And anyone go. I
In
tricked 'em.
context, I think would be mine.
Okay.
That's my phrase. I like to receive feedback. I don't really care how I receive it, but if you can put it in context for me, that's super helpful.
Absolutely.
That's a hard one. I'm gonna echo what Giselle put in the chat, empathy, which I know saying that might seem like rainbows and sunshine a little bit, but what I love about that is when you truly care about people, you care enough about them to even tell them when they need to do something differently or better, right? And when people know you care about them, then they receive that feedback, they become stronger because of it. And whenever you feel like someone's giving you feedback for the wrong reasons, that's when bad stuff happens. So definitely empathy.
I'll go. I intelligently, right? Like if you're going to give me specifically constructive feedback, whether it be constructive or positive feedback on something that I've done or I'm doing, like I need to know that you know what you're talking about. Right? Like I need to know that you've done the work to understand what I did right or didn't do wrong. Because if you compliment me for something that I did and I'm like, you have no idea that it didn't do anything. Right. Or worse, if you're telling me something like that I could do better, right? And you don't understand that cannot be done. It is impossible to do that thing in this time frame, right? So I think to me, it needs to be well thought out, needs to be intelligent.
Fair.
Mine
Round
is
us out, Marion.
mine's impact. Like not like, do you ever do like this huge, great thing and then there's feedback that's related to like one little corner edge of it? It's like, yeah, but what's the impact? Like, what's the impact of that feedback on the human that you're giving it to? And then what's the impact of the piece that you're giving feedback on? Like, do you want to focus on what went well or that one little piece that didn't? So I think the impact overall kind of what on you and the organization and that human before you give that feedback.
Awesome. All right, guys, we're going to wrap up. Thank you so much for joining us, viewers, panelists. Thank you so much for all of your insights on giving and receiving feedback in a multi-generational workforce. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye now.